Hi, I'm Linda Van Hart, Visual Arts Coordinator for Common Ground on the Hill. We are celebrating our 29th year this year. This is the conclusion of our virtual week, and we're very much looking forward tomorrow to Common Ground on the Town, Sunday to welcoming everyone to campus, getting everyone registered and housed. We have an instructor show opening between 4:30 and 5:30, which kicks off our week, and orientation tomorrow evening. Then our classes begin Monday through Friday with a fantastic festival on the 8th of July. I hope you're joining us for all or part of that. This is our last night of the gallery talks for our virtual week. And we are so pleased to have Don and Ellen Elmes speaking with us about a project that they premiered with us last year in the instructor show in Rice Gallery. It was beyond the proposal stage at that time for a mural project in Tazewell County. Don and Ellen have teamed up with her artistic side and his science side, and they have researched a very unique application technique for exterior murals. And this one is a stellar example of their collaboration as scientist and artist. He's also an artist because he's a fantastic photographer. So they will speak with you about the preparation, about the intention of the project, some of the technicalities of doing it, the conclusion and the celebration, the reception of it by the people of Tazewell County. We're so proud of them, and we want you to think deeply about artists not just creating things of beauty, not just expressing themselves, but of having the intention to change the way people think. And that's a really important part of what Don and Ellen do. Take it away, Don and Ellen Elmes.
Thank you, Linda. We are really pleased to be with everyone tonight and want to take some time to share with you a little more about the project. We're speaking from Bearwaller on the mountaintop of Jewel Ridge in the Appalachian Mountains. And of course, our community is very rural. We've lived here for over 50 years. And even though being a rural area, we have a community that we've been quite enmeshed with over the years, but it's been a rather conservative community politically. And I don't think our community is different from others, whether rural or urban, in the fact that for the last number of years, all of us have been kind of under the yoke of divisive politics. And I'm giving you this background because our project evolved out of divisive politics. And what we would like to do, we were involved in this project for over a 2-year period. And we're going to give you background on it and how it started. But we would like to begin at the end by showing you just a short video that gives you a glimpse of our process in this project and a little background, but it focuses primarily on a time when our community celebrated with joy and with pride, where this project took us as a community and somewhat healed us. So we're going to start with the end, and then we'll go back from there.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone here today on this beautiful fall day, celebrating a historic date in County of Tazewell. We're just so blessed. April 2021, the Board of Supervisors met, and they wanted to do something about Black history. So someone came up and proposed that they do murals if they knew anyone that had made history in Tazewell County. They had to have done something that impacted their community. They have been the first to do something in the community. The supervisors approved the people on the committee, commissioned Elmes to do the project. And from then on, we set criteria and got to work.
Of the murals I've done over the years, many of them have been what I call community murals. And that means not just that people work with me on painting murals, but if it's a mural about a town or a city, I interview people who live there all their lives. I work with students who sketch designs for the mural and we put that together. So it's really a community effort from the beginning.
Everybody put in their data, their information, and we read each presentation of who they were going to select. And when we all got through, we voted on each one. And what you see is a consensus by the group. In the Black community, we've always honored our achievements. But this is the county honoring our achievements, which makes it even more important. It was overwhelming. I came Thursday night just to walk through and read all of the biographies. Just an amazing experience. The community members were wonderful. I loved listening to their stories and the joy and the excitement they had in telling their stories. And on some of the biographies, I was moved to tears.
It's an honor for me to be here today. I'm the son of a history teacher, and today is a historic day. History teachers will tell you that sometimes history is taught in broad strokes, and sometimes those broad strokes get set in stone. But they will tell you that history is written in small strokes.
As we stand here, friends and residents of Tazewell County, we thank God for bringing us through all the dips and the hollows. We each chose someone to research, and I chose Coach Lou Carey and Jim Hickenpother. Through the highways and the byways, through the hills and the mountains, I researched Jack Gravett.
Dr. Herman Branson,
Dr. Zerl Augustus Palmer, you brought us through every situation. You have made us proud and you have made us brave. I'm going to tell you a little about the Holly sisters. I stand to represent Andrew Henry. Remember the legacies of those who came before us. I am the niece of George L. Gibson and the granddaughter of George Willis Gibson. Dorothea Cousins Fleming, Ebenezer Howard Harper,
James Knox Smith,
we remember the songs, the stories they carried us through. Sally Whitten, Alonzo Slambright, Mr. Samuel Harris. Remember them all. Continue to help us be more diverse as we cast a vision for a progressive future, acknowledging our combined power and creativity. Help us to welcome everyone to the table.
Very nice. Every time we play that video, it's hard for us not to come to tears. But I want to tell you how all of this began. Back in 2019, a small group of folks in Tazewell decided that they wanted to start celebrating Juneteenth. And so they set up a committee and planned for a Juneteenth celebration. The idea was to meet at the courthouse in front of the Confederate statue and have a brief presentation by one of the local ministers. And then we would walk from there to the county fairgrounds and have a afternoon's lunch celebration. Unfortunately, what happened was that rumors started spreading on Facebook. And before the actual event, people on Facebook were believing that the purpose of our meeting in front of the statue was to tear it down. And on the day of June 19th, when we all gathered there, about 6 different men came walking in, and they stood shoulder to shoulder in front of the statue with their arms crossed like this, and just sort of stared out at us who were gathering. And the speaker looked at them and he said, "I could care less about that statue. I came here today to talk about freedom and how Juneteenth was the last day of slavery for our country." And that was the first sort of confrontation. The next year was during the pandemic, and we gathered again several blocks away, but this year there were men in camouflage that gathered in front of the statue with weapons, carrying guns. Later that year, there was a referendum about whether to keep this statue in front of the courthouse, and the referendum passed by over 80% to keep the statue. And we during the several years prior to that, Ellen and I had done an actual mural in Tazewell in a different location, but we had researched some of the walls that were available. And it turned out that right next to the courthouse, there was an empty wall. And I sort of threw that idea out to Ellen, and Ellen came up with a fantastic idea for the county.
After the vote to keep the statue where it was, and realizing here was this wall just yards away, I began thinking, well, why don't we try to do something to broaden history, do inclusive history, tell the history that's untold of the African American citizens in our county. And I came up with the idea of people gathering together to determine who might be 12, a dozen or more citizens who during time going back to the days of slavery should be honored and their stories told. So I took this idea to the Board of Supervisors of Tazewell County. And I have to be honest in that when I took the proposal to them, I wasn't real confident that they were going to take me up on it, but happily they did. And in fact, one of the supervisors said, "I'm so glad you've come to us with this, because ever since the vote, my community that I represent, my part of the county, has wanted me to do something to balance this heavy attention put on the Confederate past of our county." And so the only thing was they agreed that a good way to begin would be to form a citizens committee, that they would appoint 2 citizens from each of the 5 regions of our county to serve on it, primarily Black citizens who would work together to determine what people should be honored. And the thing was, I was elated that they agreed to this. And then they put out a letter to me and other people who were to serve on this committee, calling the committee the Courthouse Grounds Improvement Committee. So I knew then that they were in on this, but they were being politically careful, which I couldn't blame them. So the committee was formed, and we met. It ended up being 9 of us, and we gathered once a month starting in July of 2021. And we met from there on for a year and a half. And in this slide, you can see the committee members who served, including the tall man on the right is our county administrator who served on the committee with us. And the woman standing second from the right is one of our Board of Supervisors members, also active in the committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
The committee decided that there were 3 criteria that had to be met for people to be considered as folks to include in the mural. The first criteria was that they had to be born in Tazewell County. So all of the people represented here were actually born in that county. The second was that they had to have died. And the reason for that was because if we had selected anybody that was living, possibly they might end up doing something wrong and people wouldn't care for them to be up there. And the third criteria was that they had to have a significant impact on other people in the region. And the people represented a wide range of life experiences, and they also inspired many young people. The first person that was selected was Coach Lou Peary. He was a coach in Tazewell County at the high school for over 30 years. And during that time period, he was a mentor to hundreds of folks who went through the high school. And he even taught some folks who later became members of the professional baseball leagues. And he was a true person that folks admired. He was the first one we put on the wall. And as we were putting him up, people would walk by on the street and say, "Oh, there's Coach Lou Peary." And they were very pleased to see that. The second person was Jimmy Higginbotham. He was born and raised in Tazewell County. He became a deputy sheriff for a while. And in the end, he became the first Black chief of police in Tazewell County. And he was, again, somebody that the town admired. He and his wife would have folks come over to their home. Children would play in their yards. And he was also a mentor for young folks.
Another person represented on the wall is Jack Gravely. And as Don mentioned, one of the criteria was everyone had to be born in Tazewell County, but they didn't necessarily stay in Tazewell County. Jack Gravely moved to Richmond as a young man, and he became a well-known radio broadcaster and loved for the kind of a talk show combination with other things, but he was very active as an NAACP civil rights leader, both locally, statewide, and nationally. And so during the 60s and 70s, he had many of the leaders of the national civil rights movement on his show, where he interviewed them on many occasions. And then the 2 sisters that you see on the right are from a large family, the Holly family, that has lived in Tazewell County for generations. And both of these sisters became well-known, admired educators. Minnie Holly, the younger sister on the left, ended up in West Virginia teaching at the school for deaf and blind students in West Virginia. That's why she's signing love, and also is beloved by Tazewell County people living today when they were part of her Girl Scout troop. And she was instrumental in bringing young Black girls into Girl Scouts.
Or Hattie.
And Hattie, her sister, again, was such a dedicated educator, became a principal at one point. She was an educator before integration, during segregation, and afterwards. And there is actually a road in Tazewell named after the Holly family for their influence.
The folks on the left, the first one, Herman Branson, he had a very interesting story because he graduated from school, went on to Howard University. He studied physics and became a practicing physicist and was head of the physics department at Howard University. During the 50s, late 40s and 50s, he ended up working with Linus Pauling and was instrumental in developing the mathematical formulation of the alpha helix, for which Linus Pauling received the Nobel Peace or the Nobel Prize, but Herman Branson received. If you look online, you can find papers that are written by both of them. Then next to him is Zerl Palmer, who wanted to become a pharmacist. He had to travel out of state to study that, but then he moved to Lexington, Kentucky, where he set up a store in a Rexall store as a pharmacist and was the first Black pharmacist there. He then tried to open a second store in the 60s. And while he and his family were in that store, it was bombed by the Ku Klux Klan and destroyed. Fortunately, his family weren't hurt. On the right is Andrew Henry. He was a Bluefield, Virginia native. He was very influential in setting up several churches. He was a minister, but he also later became the first Black town councilman for the city of Bluefield.
The two men on the left are father and son. And the father married twice. And with his first wife, he had 8 children. And with the second wife, he had 8 more. And 8 of those children were sons. And this drawing that I did of these two people to begin with came from a larger photo showing the father in the middle of his 8 sons. And I was just struck by the pride of his stature, the way he's standing and so proud of his family. He was a well-known and beloved minister for many, many years. Both men were poets and published some books of poetry. And the younger George Dickerson often came to our community college back in the 90s and read his poetry. And I just want to read you what's written at the base of his feet. That's a part of a poem that he wrote called "'Cause I'm Colored." And the gist of the poem is about all the things he couldn't do in his life or was degraded for, always 'cause I'm colored. But the last stanza says, "One day I know there'll be a change 'cause I'm colored. And folks won't look at me so strange 'cause I'm colored. You won't see me with head all bowed, and I won't have to talk so loud. You'll see me standing tall and proud 'cause I'm colored." And I particularly wanted to read that to you because that became the name of our mural when it was completed. The suffragist, Lethea Cousins Fleming, didn't live in Tazewell County for long, went off away for her schooling, came back to teach briefly at a local college, but then ended up marrying and settling in Cleveland, Ohio. There is where she became a suffragist, very active, became more and more active in politics, and later in her life, she was the campaign manager for communities for presidential elections, including Coolidge and Harding's campaigns.
Sally Whitten, as you see, was born in 1867. So she lived in the latter half of the 19th century and into the 20th century. She was the first Black in Tazewell County, and she was a well-beloved midwife who helped bring many young folks into their lives in Tazewell County. On the right, James Knox Smith is the person with the top hat. You can see he was born in 1852. He was born a slave, later became a free person, and was taught by a school teacher who found that he was definitely gifted at learning, and he encouraged him to study law, and he got a law degree and ended up practicing law in Keystone, West Virginia. He had a glass eye, and he became known as the jail robber because in his summations, whenever he was trying to gain the sympathy of the jury, he would rub the glass eye and it would bring tears to his eyes. And with those tears, he was able to convince the jury to let his clients go. On the right is Ebenezer Howard Harper. He was a lawyer as well, but he also became the first Black legislator in West Virginia. He served there as a legislator for several years, but then he died of a heart attack, and his wife took over the position, becoming the first female Black legislator in the country.
And the mural ends up, there are 16 people total honored and depicted in it, but at the right end of the mural, going back in time, are these two people. And I just want to first mention the coal miner on the right does not depict a particular coal miner, but instead Black miners who were in the mines from the very beginning in Pocahontas in 1883, when mining first started in our area. And you see the communities listed next to the miner where there have been coal camps and mining companies for many, many years on up through the 1900s into the 21st century. The last person that's depicted on the mural wall is Samuel Harris. He was a teacher, a preacher. He was born into slavery and came up from learning as a slave how to do carpentry and farming. And he ended up with his own farm at some point in a community where many freed people went to live. And the quick story about him, he lived to be 107 or 108. They're not sure. He didn't have a birth certificate, but he had a person come to his door saying he was a doctor traveling long distances, and could Samuel put him up for a week or so? And so the family agreed, and Samuel Harris wondered why a doctor would need so many holsters hanging off his bedpost with guns in them. But the man went on after about 10 days, and a week later they learned in the newspaper that it was Jesse James who had just robbed a bank in Huntington after leaving Samuel Harris's place. So for this project, once the advisors agreed to it, then I began gathering a group of artists to work with me. I created all the sketches of the figures, and I painted all of the faces, except for a couple of them, with a few artists who worked with me as well. But these are the range of ages and people from different parts of our county who met with me all through the month of June And as you saw in the video, we worked off the wall. We worked on fabric panels, and Don's going to tell you a little more about that in a minute. But I just wanted to point out that each person here is standing in front of the person that they took charge of in painting their clothing, hats and everything that went with the full, and these are full size portraits. They're to scale of a real person. So it was a great group to work with. And then at the end, our group of artists decided that the committee was interested in putting their hands to the mural panels. And so at the very end, we had a day where committee members came in and painted the backgrounds with us. And so it really became quite the project, an inclusive project. And I just want to mention, you see Brandon Viney on the right, middle of the slide, and he's with Lou Peary. Brandon was coached by and taught by Lou Peary when he was in high school about, I don't know, it was back in the early 90s. And he was one of the many who so admired Coach Peary. And he now lives out in Portland, Oregon, and is an artist in advertising. And I was able to send him the rolled up fabric, and Brandon painted the top of panel of his beloved Coach to participate long distance in this project.
So we wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about this technique. We took a workshop back in the, I guess, around 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. We took a workshop in Philadelphia where they have this mural arts program. And in this mural arts program, they produce about 100 murals every summer that are installed in the city of Philadelphia. And we had heard about this, we had heard rumblings about this thing called parachute cloth, and we didn't know what in the world that was. So we made inquiries and found out we could take a workshop with the artists in Philadelphia. And he told us about this technique. It's not parachute cloth, it's a material called pellon. Pellon is something that's used in quilting and also in men's jackets and so on. It's a fabric material, it's a synthetic material. But the material is coated on both sides with an acrylic gel. And when you paint a mural on a wall without this technique, first of all, you put a sealer on the wall, then you put on coats of acrylic paint to paint the painting, then you put a sealer over top of that, and finally a UV protectant. And this is really no different, except that you're using this acrylic gesso material of the pellon to carry the imagery on. The advantage of that is that we can send the imagery off to a person in Philadelphia who will then prepare this pellon material and then run it through a large format printer. And he can print a ghost image of the mural full size. And that eliminates the whole process of transferring imagery to the wall. It's now part of the fabric material. And a second advantage is that the fabric material can be set up in different locations. And as you saw, more than one person can be working on it. We did a mural where over 150 people were involved in painting on the fabric material. A third advantage is that for the artists, they don't have to be on scaffolding out in 100-degree weather dodging thunderstorms. They can be inside in a comfortable space, air conditioned, and produce the whole mural. And then the only time the scaffolding or lift is needed is in the actual installation. And a fourth advantage is that we've made some murals painted directly on the wall, and sometimes there's seepage from the mortar that will actually seep through the paints and cause a chalky appearance of the mural. By using this fabric material, that whole chalkiness is eliminated. So we were sold on the technique, and once the panels are painted, then we use an acrylic gel. We put it on the wall. We mark out exactly where each panel will go. We put the gel on the wall, and then we put it on the back of the panel, and then we position the panel in place and use squeegees to squeegee out the excess gel. It's virtually like doing wallpaper, only on a larger scale. And we then also try to follow the mortar joints, in particular the horizontal joints, to squeeze out more of the gel. And as the gel dries, it actually shrinks a little bit, pulling the fabric material into the mortar joints. So when you're done, it looks exactly like it would look if it were painted right on the wall. Okay.
Yeah. So this gives you a look at the finished project that includes not just the 16 portraits of the honored citizens, but as you can see, plaques were created and a sidewalk laid, and this was fully financed and supported by our county board of supervisors. You can see there's a stone wall behind the plaques, and that wall is 100 years old. And the plaques were put up to line up to where if you're standing in front of one plaque, you're looking straight across to the one or two people portrayed in a particular panel, and you read their full story and history. So it's a very educational spot that tells the full story of these folks and what impact, which was the most important criteria, what impact they have had through the years and through the ages on not just our area, but statewide and nationally, other states, and also, most importantly, how they inspired people of their age. And now today, they have the opportunity through their portraits to inspire our young people. And to that fact, this Juneteenth celebration we recently had in Tazewell included for the first time an essay contest. And the graduating seniors in Tazewell County high schools were invited to write an essay about one or two of the people portrayed in the mural. And we were able to get donations to give them monetary awards towards going on to college this coming fall. And they gathered at the mural on Juneteenth, on the 19th of June, and were given their awards and read their essays and poems that they had written. So we plan to make this an ongoing site and source of pride, honor, and education. And in fact, a coloring book has been made of line drawings of each of the portrait figures, and this will be distributed to all fourth grade students this coming fall.
And
so if you were standing this right here, the way you're seeing the mural and the plaques, right behind you would be that Confederate statue. And so this just kind of takes you back to where we began as to how this project got started. And I would like to just point out that the reason we wanted to present this to you today and share some of the process and the ideas is that we feel, and I feel very strongly, that this is a project that could be replicated in other small towns, in other cities, by other artists and by other community leaders as a positive way to expand, to acknowledge, to include our full histories where we live. And I mean, I have to just express how honored I was to be part of this and to see how it kind of took on a life of its own, but also how we learned that people who I hadn't even expected to be interested in the project or to support the project, they welcomed that opportunity. You know, hard, fast, conservative people welcome this opportunity to work with us and to be part of, you know, our committee was the driving force of it. And that those committee members, many of them come from large families. Many of them are descendants of the generations of the people portrayed. And so this was like throwing a rock in a pool and all the concentric circles that keep on developing from it. Now, I do have a few other slides we can show that relate to a few other projects that are similar in content and inspiration. But Linda, is there a way we can answer questions, or is this, I didn't know if people watching might have some questions they'd like to ask.
I'm looking at the chat now, and I don't see questions showing up right now. What we're finding is that possibly this evening's audience is smaller than the overall expectation will be, because many families are finishing dinner and getting ready to go to the concert, and we'll tune into you later. So if there are questions later, we can send them to you. If you have other, I know you have other wonderful mural projects that this is such a meaningful project. I am so proud of you and so thrilled that you've gotten the reception that you have gotten to your imagination and persistence on this issue, and the brilliance of the carry through with the committee and all of the artists that participated with you. It's become a huge community project, and I think expanding it that way is one of the reasons for its complete acceptance and celebration. I'm so thrilled with the writing that's gone on with the high school students as a result. That's exceptional. If you would like to show us a few other projects, that's fine. We have the time.
Yeah, we'll skip to a few other groups of slides we have that I want to just say a few things about related to this kind of mural content. Just go to just bear with us for a second. Okay, Don mentioned earlier that we had done another project in the same town of Tazewell a few years before, and he said that there were 150 people who participated. So again, kind of giving a shout out to other mural artists in other communities. This one, again, was done on that fabric, the fabric panels, And because of that, we were able to work in what had been an old wood shop at the middle school in Tazewell. And we used the butcher block tables and laid out these panels for days and days. It was over a month that I was there, and we had an open house to come paint. And the reason I was able to do that is because it literally was a paint by number project. You can see here people working on it from young to older. If you look at the lower right slide, you see a very young great granddaughter sitting in the foreground, and her great grandmother is in the background of that table.
She's 99.
And this year, she's 99 years old. So people came as groups, they came as family members, and every design, every image in the mural was numbered. And you can see in the left picture in the slide, a paper with all those splotches of paint colors. We ended up with, over, I don't know, we had like 80 jars of different colors. And a person, when they come in, I'd say, so have you painted before? Do you have painting experience? And some would say no. So I'd take them to an easy part, like you can see the solid green and solid blue in the upper right picture. And I'd say, okay, well, you could paint this area. And it was numbered, maybe number 5. So go get number 5 to paint this green. And it worked really well. Some days we had a bunch of people coming. We had up to 30 some one day, which was pretty hard to handle. But other days we'd have 3 or 4. And I had regular painters who came every day. So it was a wonderful, fun project. And it was based on, I went to the elementary schools in the fall of the year before and met with 5th graders in 3 different schools. And I would bring them a project or a drawing idea every time I met with them. So one day you can see in the middle, I asked them to draw cows. And then we did another day sheep, and we did sunflowers and birds and pumpkins. And the best day was in one of the schools was a big painting of the bulldog, which is the kind of the county mascot for the teams and the Tazewell Bulldogs. And so there was a big picture painted on the gym wall. So I took the 5th graders in there and said, now get down on your bellies and here's paper and draw yourself a bulldog. I thought I was going to just choose one bulldog out of the bunch, but those bulldogs, as you can see, they ended up being so expressive. Who knew that a bulldog could be so expressive? So anyway, that was a fun project. And I worked with high school and middle school students to do the borders of the mural. And in this case, I asked them, each student, what is your interest? What do you most enjoy doing? And so like in the lower left picture, you see a band member, and she is depicted, she's the one, that's herself, her own portrait on the left, but to the right is a band member from like 40 years ago. And then others who were interested, well, football players and volleyball players. And then we also were able in this mural to memorialize, sadly, a couple of students who died young. And so the graduates, the young woman graduate, had died in a car accident. And the woman in the middle photo, who's leaning to the right up above, had died of cancer. And so the mural includes real people as well. Okay, and then this is, you can see Don in the middle. When he puts on the final sealer, it's a little toxic, so he has to put on respiratory protection. And the woman at the top is Shelley Lalonde, who worked with us. Okay, and just really quickly, let's go. Dawn mentioned that we had gone to Philadelphia to learn about this technique of mural painting. And I just want to give credit to my admired mentor. I've never met her in person, but Jane Golden in 1980 was brought from California to Philadelphia by the mayor because they were having a graffiti problem that many buildings in the city were being covered with graffiti. In some cases, they wanted it, in other cases, not so much. So these mostly young people were brought to court and fined or given a little bit of jail time. And the mayor didn't want that. So he brought Jane Golden, a mural painter, to come and give all the people brought in for being caught doing graffiti to have a third option, which was to paint on murals and put their talents and skills. So, I have long admired her, and this is an early work done in Philly. Keep going, Dawn. There's Jane Golden, and another mural in the city. If I'm sure some of you who may end up seeing this live there or live close by, and if you don't even live close by, it's worth a trip to Philly. They now have over, what is it? They have
Several thousand.
1,000, almost 1,000 murals. And it's been going on since 1980. And I want to show, well, and like our project, they have honored their greats of the city through mural portraiture. Of course, these are huge. The Dr. J mural is the whole height of that building. And then in the last slide here, I'm sorry. Let me see, go one more, Dawn. Yeah, I thought Sharonka might be particularly interested in this. There were 2 murals done, Jane Golden and an artist named Cesar Viveras Herrera got together and decided, because they were going to do these murals on fabric, that they could go into the prisons and work with inmates and enable the inmates to paint on the panels that then were later installed on the walls. But rather than just work with inmates, they thought of the project as a way to maybe bring inmates together with families who were victims of murder and crime, and their family members had been killed or harmed. And so there was a long process of trying to have conversations between inmates in one prison, in this SCI Grataford prison in Philly, with some of the victim family members. And it was a struggle. And the idea initially had been to take what both sides of the conversation had expressed, and the artist was then going to put it into one mural. But each community was so stressed what they wanted to say and wanted to say it separately. And so they decided on 2 murals. And this was one done a couple of blocks away from the other one, which we'll show here. And so the victim's journey, we can see one of the mothers of her son had been murdered years ago, and she became really a spokeswoman and leader in her community through this mural. And the beautiful thing about it is that if you go back a minute on to the first mural, in the end, when the panels were brought to the prison for some of the inmates to work on, they invited the victims' family members to come, those who were painters, to come and join them. And they ended up working together over on a table over these mural panels. And that's when they had some really deep conversations. And the inmates were really serious about wanting to help the victim's family understand, or at least have some way of expressing to them, to the family members, their great sorrow and regret and remorse. And that happened over this table, these table conversations. So this is a really powerful mural. Just each one is within a block of the other. And so I think that's, do we have, what time? Linda, do you want me to do one more, or do I have time to do one more or not?
Yes.
Okay, it'll be brief, another 5 minutes maybe. Just go to the next. Excuse me. So, as we know, I'm sure many of you have seen this, after these horrible and reoccurring, unending shootings in cities, so many Black lives lost, so many lives lost, Black and brown. In our country, it seems like they happen now every week, but one of the early shootings that people came to know about broadly, and what really spurred the Black Lives Matter movement was in Ferguson, Missouri. And so I'm just showing you a couple of slides from Ferguson, how murals can be a healing entity. And you can see this was the top left slide, photo was shortly after Michael Brown was shot, and stores were looted, and there was just such terrible horror at what had happened, and the community in upheaval. But afterwards, people came together and began painting murals. And even early on some of the boarded up stores, they painted on the wood panels that had been used to board up the stores. Here's one of the painters. And then you'll notice in the lower right photo, it mentions that the lead artist, A.J. Rosenberg, invited some off-duty police officers to come and help paint on that particular mural. And then here's another one. And you can see it's on the boards that are blocking the window that had been burst into. Okay. And I think there's one more. Just to show you even more briefly, this idea of using murals for justice, social justice, for community pride, for expression. One of the earliest happened back in the late 60s, and many of you may be familiar with this, called the Wall of Respect in Chicago. And it became sort of a group of dedicated artists who decided they wanted to, like we tried to do all these years later, by doing portraits of people we admire and whose history maybe hadn't been put forth in pride and knowledge. And so here's when that mural was going up, here's pictures of some of the people in the community who would just gather there at night and admire it and discuss, these are our people. So it became a real source of pride. And the last one is, I have to talk about I don't know why her name is missing. Judy Baca is another one of my heroes. She's from California. Her name is supposed to be there under the photo on the right, but she has worked with young people, especially juveniles who have been put in juvenile detention centers, and work with them when they come out. And this particular one was a work of years that was on a, what would you call it? It was the wall along the aqueduct. I mean, it's miles long. And so Judy Baca is another hero. That's it. I think that's the last one. I just
Well, I'm so proud of you. And I'm gathering the energy of Laura and Doc Griswold, Bill and Sylvia Tribby, Basil and Oksana Polishuk, Ira Murray Zappa, and saying thank you. Thank you. Fantastic.
thank you, Linda.
Going.
They're watching over me. Thank you.
We look forward to having you with us next week.
We're looking forward to coming.
We're
Thank
already,
you, everyone, for being inspired by these social activists.
It was really good. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Saranka, for being here.
Good to
I
see
hope this inspires you too. You're doing great work.
Thank you. Thank you. It is wonderful what you're doing. Keep doing.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope to see you sometime soon.
we hope
so
to see
too.
you too.
Next
Exactly.
year.
Have
This
a very good
concludes-
evening.
Yes. This concludes our gallery talk for our virtual week 1 at Common Ground on the Hill. It's not too late to register for some of our classes in person. Next week, July 3rd through the 7th, tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon, Off Track Art welcomes you between 3 and 6 o'clock. We have Common Ground artist Pamela Zappardino, a fantastic photographer, Thomas Sterner, an incredible woodworker, teaching an overfull welding class with us this week, and other former partners of Off Track Art. That's from 3 to 6. Join us for Harry Orlove's Cool Jazz with Wine from 6 to 7:15, and Shannon Quinlan in concert at 7:30, kicking off Common Ground on the Town. We hope you safe travels on Sunday. To get live with us, get your room set up as instructors, get excited as students. We're going to have a fantastic week next week. The 8th is the Roots Festival. Don't miss it. Good night.